The lawyer's office was so quiet, you could hear the tick of the clock on the wall. My brother leaned back in his chair, smug, already imagining himself holding the keys to my home. He thought a whispered promise from our parents was enough to erase decades of paperwork, mortgage payments, and responsibility. But what he didn't know was that I had the deed, the payment ledger, and the law on my side. That day at the will reading, he expected me to bow down. Instead, he walked out with nothing but silence and a frozen asset. I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than reality. My parents loved the grand gestures, the showy announcements, the kind of promises that made relatives murmur, "Wow, what a generous family." But when the lights dimmed and everyone went home, the real work, the house, the $950,000 family house, wasn't just bricks and wood to me. It was my anger. I had co-signed the mortgage with my parents when they were struggling financially. And over the years, I carried most of the payments. Renovations, repairs, property taxes. If it needed to be done, it was me writing the checks. My brother? He floated in and out, always promising to pay me back later. Later never came. Still, my parents clung to him. The golden son. They called him the one who would someday carry on the family name. I learned to stay quiet, to do the work without demanding applause. But deep down, I always wondered, what would happen if the truth finally came out? The answer arrived sooner than I expected. At my mother's birthday dinner a year before she passed, I overheard her whisper to my brother, "Don't worry, the house will be yours when the time comes. Consider it our wedding gift to you and Melissa." I froze. Did she really just promise him my house? The one I had poured sweat and money into? I swallowed the anger that night, smiling through gritted teeth, because starting a war at a birthday dinner wasn't going to help anyone. But inside, something shifted. I began keeping every receipt, every payment slip, every notarized document in a neat, fireproof folder. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I knew one day I might have to. When both of my parents passed within 18 months of each other, grief weighed heavy. And yet, even at the funeral, my brother's entitlement seeped through. While I was arranging flowers and thanking guests, he leaned in with a smirk and said, "You know Mom and Dad promised me the house. It'll be easier if you just sign it over now." Easier? For whom? That was the moment I knew this wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a battle over truth, respect, and when the lawyer called for the probate hearing, I sensed it would all come to a head. But I had no idea just how far my brother was willing to go, or how public his downfall would be. The probate hearing was set for a Tuesday afternoon. I remember walking in with my folder tucked neatly under my arm, steadying myself for whatever storm awaited. My brother, of course, arrived late, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 of my mortgage payments combined. His wife sat beside him, whispering strategy like a sideline coach. When the lawyer cleared his throat to begin, my brother wasted no time. "Mom and Dad made it clear," he said loudly. "The house is mine. They promised it to me as a wedding gift. We don't even need to drag this out." And when the lawyer called for the probate hearing, I sensed it would all come to a head. But I had no idea just how far my brother was willing to go, or how public his downfall would be. The probate hearing was set for a Tuesday afternoon. I remember walking in with my folder tucked neatly under my arm, steadying myself for whatever storm awaited. My brother, of course, arrived late, wearing a suit that probably cost more than 3 of my mortgage payments combined. His wife sat beside him, whispering strategy like a sideline coach. When the lawyer cleared his throat to begin, my brother wasted no time. Mom and Dad made it clear, he said loudly. The house is mine. They promised it to me as a wedding gift. We don't even need to drag this out. The audacity almost made me laugh. Almost. But here's the thing. Sometimes people repeat a lie so often, they start to believe it themselves. And my brother had convinced himself that his promise outweighed decades of legal documentation. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Do you have any proof of that promise? That's when betrayal 1 landed. My brother slid a sheet of paper across the table, a photocopy of a letter supposedly signed by my mother. The handwriting was shaky. The date suspiciously close to the week she was in the hospital, heavily medicated. Forgery. I clenched my fists under the table, keeping my composure. My lawyer glanced at me and nodded. A silent signal. We've got this. The hearing moved forward. I presented the co-signed mortgage, my payment ledger, the deed, all notarized and stamped. Still, my brother kept pushing. Those are just technicalities, he scoffed. The intent was clear. My parents wanted me to have that house. Intent versus reality. Words versus action. How many of us have been crushed by promises that never materialized? But betrayal number 2 was yet to come. A week later, while the court reviewed documents, I discovered my brother had tried to move in preemptively. Yes, he showed up at the property with a moving truck, telling the neighbors it was already his. That one stung. My sanctuary, my home, reduced to a pawn in his performance. So I doubled down. I contacted the bank directly, secured official statements showing every payment traceable to my account. I even pulled out the renovation permits, all under my name. Piece by piece, I built a wall of truth so high that even his entitlement couldn't climb over. The day of the final hearing arrived. My brother smirked, as if he still had a winning card hidden up his sleeve. But as the lawyer flipped through the ledger, the smirk slowly faded. Based on the documentation presented, the lawyer announced, the property in question cannot be transferred. In fact, due to attempted misrepresentation, the asset will remain frozen until further notice. Silence. Frozen. Just like that, his claim evaporated. But this wasn't about me winning. It was about finally putting boundaries where none had existed before. Still, as I walked out of that courtroom, one question lingered. Why do some people think love is a blank check they're entitled to cash? Once I saw how far my brother was willing to go, my strategy became crystal clear. Stay calm, stay legal, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. I didn't yell, I didn't make threats, and I certainly didn't stoop to forging papers. Instead, I leaned on the years of quiet work I had already done. Every mortgage slip, every tax receipt, every notarized signature became part of my arsenal. And the best part? I didn't even have to deliver the blow. The lawyer did it for me, calmly, professionally, and without drama. Sometimes revenge isn't about fireworks. It's about patience, preparation, and letting the facts speak louder than any tantrum. The final probate hearing was packed. Extended family, neighbors who had heard the gossip, even distant cousins who barely knew us. My brother thrived on audiences. He wanted a stage, and this was his chance. Clearing his throat, Mom and Dad wanted me to have the house. Everyone knows that. My sister's just being greedy. Greedy. That word cut deep. How often had I sacrificed quietly so he could shine? The lawyer didn't raise his voice. He simply laid the deed and ledger on the table. This is the official record. Payments made by the cosigner, your sister. Renovations under her name. Tax receipts in her. Gasps rippled through the room. My brother's face flushed crimson. Then came the final blow. Due to attempted fraud, the property will remain frozen. Any further action to claim it will require criminal investigation. Public, controlled, final. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered my papers, stood tall, and walked out. The whispers followed me, but so did the truth. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my brother was deafening. No more late-night calls demanding money. No more smug declarations. He learned in the hardest way possible that boundaries aren't punishments. They're protections. The house is still mine. Not because my parents promised it, but because I paid for it, cared for it, and defended it. And that's the moral of this story. Love without respect is entitlement, and entitlement without boundaries becomes exploitation. Boundaries protect love. That was my story. If you've ever dealt with a sibling or family member who thought your sacrifices belonged to them, you know how draining it can be. So tell me, team forgive or team consequences? And why? More stories are coming. Subscribe so you don't miss them.